what does it look like to place art and collectibles all over the world as opposed to in just one physical location, which is how traditionally that has been perceived. How do we acquire amazing pieces of work so more people can experience them, put them in academic and cultural contexts, and then place them all over the world? And we use community and technology to both amplify the pieces, amplify the artists, and grow the collection itself.
Welcome to Luxury on Air, where we explore the trends, innovations, and personalities defining and redefining the luxury industry.
Is a museum still attractive for Gen Z? Are virtual rather than physical assets the new way of collecting? How does a global community build its own museum? My name is Karine Szegedi, and in today's episode of Luxury on Air, we're talking about all things relevant for art collectors and technology gurus. We will explore how luxury items and collectibles get a new life through next generation art collection solutions, thanks to the power of technology. We will speak to Tom McLeod, founder and CEO of Arkive, a distributed museum curated and owned by a global community, where members source, propose, and take part in acquisitions of artwork to build a museum collection from the bottom up. Tom, welcome to the podcast and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Karine.
So I've just touched on the key topics that we're going to discuss during this episode, but I think the most burning questions, of course, for listeners is what and who is Arkive? Can you maybe quickly describe this to us?
Sure. Arkive is a concept. No, Arkive is a distributed museum first. So what does it look like to place art and collectibles all over the world as opposed to in just one physical location, which is how traditionally that has been perceived. It is community curated. So members get to help curate what goes into that, what's valuable, what they think is impactful, which would mimic the way a curatorial board historically has functioned in a traditional sort of brick and mortar single structure museum. And Arkive is at some levels a investment vehicle as well. So you can actually be a part of the ownership of the underlying assets when they're out there. So we sort of focus on those three things. How do we acquire amazing pieces of work so more people can experience them, put them in academic and cultural contexts, and then place them all over the world? And we use community and technology to both amplify the pieces, amplify the artists, and grow the collection itself.
Okay, so a lot of interesting concept that you've put together to a new business model almost, and to a new way of using art, collecting and distributing art. You mentioned the community, you mentioned the artwork, and you mentioned the technology. Do we maybe want to start with the community? So who is your community? How did you create the community?
Yeah, I mean, the community came together relatively organically. I think, the perks of the internet, the perks of social media, the perks of just being able to start a conversation with people. We found a lot of folks were interested in the idea and the concept. At this point, it's about 3,000 people. At over 10,000 people apply to be members. The way that we've looked at it is historically, do you have some existing association with art and culture from some perspective? So do you work in a museum? Do you work in academia? Do you have a large collection? Do you avidly collect? Are you a broker? Do you have some specific reason that you would add value to the overall community around what we're doing? I think one of the things we found early on from monitoring, other sort of planned communities, largely based around the internet, is that there has to be some unifying theme. There has to be something that ties people together. And usually that has to also tie to their offline interests. So it can't be, I'm just interested in this thing because it's interesting. If you want to have cohesion, if you want people to participate, there has to be value exchange there. And a lot of times with us, that is, they might know great places to place art or collectibles. They might know a family that is looking to sell an incredible piece. They might have a relationship with a museum or a gallery that would like to have one of their artists featured. So we use that community to drive everything. So that's where we started. We started with community. And then I'd say we moved directly towards the creator side. So the artists themselves or the content or thesis around the piece. So why is this impactful? Why is what someone is creating meaningful? And why will that meaning carry forward into the future? which is sort of the third piece, which is managing to maintain that sort of museum level thesis and value, like accrual, which is tied to impact. So it does this piece mean something? It means something today. Will it mean something tomorrow? Will it mean something in 30 tomorrows? Will it mean something in 30 years? We would like to look at pieces, people, art, collectibles, collections that will have that, that feeling of impact reflected either now and into the future. And so when you put all this together, it puts everyone on a mission. And that aligned mission is, can we collect important pieces of culture to display in a way that provides a service to society, wherever that may be. And that all together allowed us to filter, create, curate, and put together a really strong community of folks aligned on that.
So that's the community, and you mentioned a bit about already the art that you are investing in or that is being created that is more contemporary art, new art?
Yeah, I mean, we have pieces that are not just art. We have the patent for the computer. That was actually the first thing we acquired. It was a very interesting debate. It was a much smaller community then. I think there was about 75 people. And there was this concept of the Genesis piece. What is the first thing that would be representative of the community? And many things were brought around. At the time, there was a few things that were being offered. There was the first edition of an Isaac Asimov book called Foundation. And Foundation is a book about a group of people who break off from a sort of central governing bodied government and move to a faraway planet to preserve the artifacts of society, if for the eventuality that group will collapse. So we thought maybe that would be an amazing symbol that we're looking at that. And then an incredible rare book collector, Jeremy Norman, he lives in Northern California. He actually manages like massive, almost internal library at his home of histories of technology, books and pieces. A member of the community knew him, and he had the British full patent for the ENIAC computer, which was the first fully automated computer. And it just struck every chord. It was like, we're using technology. This is clearly this is the genesis piece of the thing that's enabling us to have these conversations, the computer itself. It was at the time, it was a really a good price range that we could pool capital and afford. And it was something that we knew we could display publicly, that it was a curiosity that could be in a museum. It could be in the front lobby of a technology building. It could be in a co-working center. We knew people would experience it and want to see it. And so that's one of the first objects we collected. Since then, we have everything from incredible Japanese pottery. We have, we did a call with Michelle Lammy from Rick Owens, and we have a chair that she created out of reclaimed ox bone that was properly ritualistically sacrificed by an indigenous people. Just these amazing pieces, as well as large scale canvas art, etc. So the idea here is, value, but also impact and story and narrative. And that's driven most of the decision making thus far.
So here you confirm that the art is mainly physical. It's not the NFTs of any object. It's the object itself, the object or the story or the...
Correct. We have yet to acquire a pure NFT piece of art, as in like it was a digital NFT first based art, as in the image is tied directly to the transference of a token of a token. We've acquired digital art. So we have pieces of work that are digital and that use computers to generate them, and they're generative and they tell a story and they're in real time. And we create an NFT on the background of the pieces that kind of goes with it, that allows people to check in with the art and add to the provenance of it. But as yet, we haven't collected anything that's purely an NFT. And I think that's because of a lot of the stuff we've spoken of already, which is, we need to see something that has created enough impact, enough clear future museum level value to say that this will be something, 30, 40, 50 years in the future that still has that. There's probably been a few NFTs that have reached that, maybe the very first CryptoPunk or Rafiq Nadal has an incredible work that's been acquired by the MoMA, I believe in New York. there's some of these that have been impactful, but it's a pretty early form of art and collectibles at this point. And so judging the impact now might be presumptuous for the way that we're looking. We are looking as a museum, in a lot of these cases, we're looking backwards. I'd like to think of it sort of as like, it's more like accounting, where you're looking at the damage that's been done and trying to make sure that this is going to be correct going forward, as opposed to sort of forecasting or business modeling when we're trying to guess. We're trying to guess as little as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we spoke a bit of community, and I will still unpack a few community questions later on.
Of course.
We spoke about the art, and then we spoke about the technology to enable it, because of course you are displaying the art physically, but you need to manage your community. You want to, create potentially new artwork or connect more. How do you use the technology to make all this possible?
Totally. So the community exists in Discord. That's where it started. And then we've slowly migrated people to a dedicated mobile app that we built for the community. So there's, you can download the app. It registers with your account. It's matched to your login that you joined on the website itself. That allows you to do threaded conversations, partake in discussions. You can vote from within that. It also allows you to do IRL things. That was the big push, is we wanted to be able to take it from something that existed when you were sitting at a laptop or sitting at a desk to something that existed where the art itself was, which means we had to move into a mobile space. And this allows you to check in now with the art. So if you see an archive piece out in the world, you can scan it, you can check in and say you've seen it. That gets posted to the community. That also gamifies the community a little bit. You can collect points and opportunities. There's like a leaderboard for who's seen the most pieces. It adds a little more fun and flair to being a part of the overall community. But it also adds to the actual provenance of the piece. Anyone can check in. It allows the pieces to almost be functionally like billboards for the community. So anyone can see that, they can check in, they can see that they could be a part of it. It allows them to learn about Arkive as well as add to the overall provenance of the individual pieces. When you check in, that check-in occurs on chain. So you basically are signing and saying that you've seen this. That now amends to the NFT and shows a record of all the interactions that have occurred with it. So it becomes this indisputable line of provenance of the amount of people that have interacted or seen or participated with the art over its tenure in any location.
So that is the community building. What about the use of AI? What about the use of NFTs, for example, for authenticity and traceability of the pieces of art that you have?
So the NFTs are literally tied to the provenance, less to the movement. We look at it as like, we know this is the NFT that we have representing this piece. If that piece is continued to be verified as its piece, that NFT will continue to accrue sign-ins, check-ins, GPS pings. It doesn't need to move when the piece moves. So it becomes the center point for the provenance and the history tracking. Mm-hmm. It is not the representation of value. We haven't tokenized the art into the NFT. It is the representation of provenance on our side. Mm-hmm. I think there is a conversation that could go down a path in the future around how we could move it into some degree of representation of value and tie the contracts to the NFTs. In the moment, we've sort of stayed away from like securitization and direct financialization and splitting of individual objects. I think there's just a lot of gray area around global markets, how they're going to take that, securities laws between the EU and the US and Asian markets, and just we're attempting to not play that game at this point. We just want to focus on community building and getting more work out into the public. But I do think what happens is by building those primitives early on, we can extend them in the future, and that could be an option to do those things.
So what is the mission of Arkive? Is it to popularize art, to build the museums of tomorrow, to have fun with the community and use technology because that's where you come from, that feels natural to you? What was the reason of founding Arkive and having the idea of Arkive?
Yeah, I think there's a general mission we have, is that I think more people should view the Arkive collection than any other collection of work in the world. And that's very possible, right? Because we're dealing with the footprint of every location that we place a piece. It's unlikely that we have more direct individuals enter one space to see one piece than the Louvre. But if we had 1,000 pieces across 1,000 locations, and each of those places has 10 to 15,000 people that view the piece a month, we would pretty quickly catch the Louvre. So we look at it like the distributed nature of it allows for a surface area wider footprint. And that's like what we've been operating under out of the first case. I think over that, we do believe that the business model of it tied to people being able to invest in the overall fund behind it opens up a new way of patronage, which I think historically has been focused a lot on either direct to artist support, so purchasing direct from artists, which is clearly the best way, is to just buy from an artist if you want to support art. And a lot of it has turned into sort of a donator class around tax write-offs and incentivization structures. And a lot of people in this sort of new generation that are coming into capital are thinking more about, hey, these were things that we donated. Maybe this is a place to invest. I would love to not only know that I've put money into this piece that's out in the world, but I also own a little bit of it as we look at it going forward into the future. So a lot of that structure has come out. And a lot of the things we started focusing on as well are just how do we better support the artists in that process? So attempting to go directly to artists whenever possible, pay them directly, leverage the fact that there's a community, that there's public display to grow the artist's recognition and opportunity, and potentially even allow them to participate long-term in the overall value of everything by placing their piece in or having a piece come through. So looking at sort of artists first, directly into patronage, and then public display as this kind of holy trinity of opportunity there, with this overarching thesis of, if more people see it, this is net better. Let's let the most people see it as possible. It being
so your ambition is to be the new Louvre. I like the ambition. It's always good.
I wouldn't want to pick a fight with the Louvre per se.
A North Star is needed.
I wouldn't want to replace the Louvre. Let's just say that. But I think there's room for more models in the cultural display space than just the sort of traditional museum model that's existed for since Alexandria. I don't know, 1800 years.
But I mean, the Louvre is of course the physical location in Paris. Fantastic. I mean, there has evolved as well over time. In which places do you display your art? And maybe give us the generic example, because you do of course have displays and you have events as well. And maybe what has been the one event or place that is closest to your heart because it was something so special?
Yeah, I mean, we have pieces all over the world. We've had events in almost every continent now. I think we've done almost 50 countries. We usually bring pieces to those events. We've had them everything from Davos to South by Southwest to Art Basel. And at those we've brought certainly the pieces that are easier to transport, things like the Madonna Vogue fans, or the ENIAC patent, things that can move. Some of the digital art, we had digital art on display at Davos. So that's been interesting to see, and really feels like it. We've had stuff on permanent display or semi-permanent display in museums in Mexico City and all over. I think the most interesting one for me thus far, because it was like a perfect example of everything. There's these Puerto Rican artist duo called Alora and Calzadilla. They make art that focuses a lot on the infrastructure shortcomings often of Puerto Rico, and how it tends to, this might be, I don't want to overstate their intent, but at least the piece that we collected focused a lot on that. And sometimes how it's a focus on tourism at a deficit to the actual population there. And so they created this piece, it's called Electromagnetic Field, where the power was down after a large hurricane, and it was down for months and months in the rural areas. And so they collected a bunch of car batteries from cars that had been washed up, and they put them all together, put power lines that had fallen, they cut them, these high tension power lines, and they put them over giant canvases and sprinkled them with iron filings. And so then they put the power through them from the batteries that they reclaimed from the cars. It magnetized the iron filings and makes these giant, just beautiful, like streaking pictures with the reclaimed electricity that was taken from them from the power lines that weren't put back up. So it's this powerful piece that's also objectively beautiful. These giant canvases, black and white. They would shellac them. We had it on display at Art Basel in Miami in 2023. And one of our members runs a company called Detox in Calgary. And they try to bring art and design and culture to Canada. And Canada and Calgary had launched this beautiful new library It's a huge library. It feels like the Guggenheim. It like wraps slowly. It's a giant, I think it was like a 400 million Canadian building. And it turns out 100,000 people in Calgary now enter it every single month. So it's the most trafficked building in Calgary. And Calgary as a city is largely based off of oil. It's been an energy center of Canada, from shale to fracking to historical times. And so most of the money, population there has been working in that for years, but they know that we're heading towards a future that will be less about oil, and they want to focus on art and culture and how do they turn Calgary into it. And so this piece, they asked if it could be there in their lobby. So when people would walk in, they would see this incredible piece of art, show that Calgary cares about art and culture, but also subtly talking about the transference of power, both literally from the piece into how we can become a technology, art, and culture hub. And I did a talk there when they announced it, and a lot of the people from the community came and listened, and that to me was a perfect storm. It was a piece that was powerful. It tied into a cultural center that was in transition. It had an academic and a beautiful placement. Hundreds of thousands of people would see it, and it was brought to us and curated by a member and members of our community. And so that to me is, if I could do that, honestly, if it only happened 10 more times, I would personally feel pretty satisfied. If we can do that thousands of times, I think, we'll make an actual impact on the planet. And that's,
so that's being part of a real transformation, and not only in a piece, it's a part of the whole city, in fact, population and city. It's amazing story.
And when they you got to picture them reading the didactic next to the piece and being like, power, electric power, that you can feel the gears turning. And I do think when that's what art should do, like that's what culture, it should inspire and teach and inform and anger in some cases. You should feel something. And I'd like to think that that's part of what the mission here is for people to feel something.
But that's the reason of being physical as well. You want to create emotion because art should be representing something and creating some sentiments and emotion within people. So you speak about transforming. I mean, we do tend to always touch based on the sustainability topic in our podcasts. You have pieces of art that are, of course, pre-owned, so you help them to have a second life and to continue. How do you, of technology uses, of course, a lot of resources as well. How do you play between all that to really impact the way that we are taking care of our planet?
Yeah, I think a lot of what occurs right now with art and collectible items in general is they are tucked away and stored in pretty poor uses of space, just giant warehouses tucked away, hidden, etc. While I don't think we are solving any environmental issues in the actual transporting and movement of it, I do think we're using better optimization of space itself if it's on display and not creating net new all the time just to fill a space. If there's existing impactful things that can be brought back out as opposed to always having to generate more material, more, etc. Anything that we've purchased that's historical represents that side. In terms of the overall impact on environment and culture and those things, I think over time it becomes clear that a lot of the pieces that are being created speak to that. So they speak to the awareness around shifting tides in technology, or shifting tides in labor, or shifting tides in the way that we interact with the world around us. And if a piece can tell a story quicker than a book or an article around why you should care about a movement, a feeling, a tree, that can be where we create impact. So largely, I think while we are not a direct environmental org, I think the way that art follows planetary trends will slowly lead to some degree of awareness around that. These are things that impact people, that create
memories for life, probably, and thoughts.
Yes.
The last question I wanted to tackle is your business model, because we understood, you have your community that are often curators that are deciding on which piece of art to invest in. You spoke a bit about a bit of a fund, which could be an alternative investment as well for people that had potentially done donations in the past. How do I bring all this together? I mean, is a curator a member? Is a member somebody else? Does it cost membership fee? Do the members and curators own the piece of art, or is it different people who own it? And how do you set up your business model? And has it evolved over time that you learn and operate it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first answer is first I'll answer the last question, which is that it has evolved over time. I think when we came to market, we were probably a little more wide-eyed around the ability for everybody to be a part of everything, which is, you're a member, you're an owner, you're a curator, you're a participator, you're all these different things. And I think what we realized that just because of the way structures are set up currently, which may change, who knows, but we have to be compliant as much as possible. It's possible to be either or both. So you can be a community member. You can also be an investor. There's two different qualifications for both. Investor might not necessarily qualify to be a member. You might just be a person who is interested in having capital exposure to this asset class, and you think this is a unique way by which you could seed that. So a community curating and that side of things. A community member might not qualify to necessarily be an investor under the rules or guidelines that we have to adhere to, whether that's know your client or anti-money laundering, or simply maybe net worth requirements, et cetera, depending upon where your jurisdiction is. But some people can be both. You might be able to be an investor and it's just sort of two separate processes. And that's kind of what we've had to do to maintain like global compliance, and the way we had to create the whole thing. I think one of the more interesting things that we were able to do, which is relatively new, there might be a few people who have done it through various other means, but never sort of at the scale we're looking at, is we can actually take physical assets as investment. So we can work directly with the creators or the artists themselves. And instead of having to place capital in, they can actually place a piece of art in, which now they are getting shares in return. It is going to go on display. It's going to go out in the world. They're actually seeing sort of investment in their own art from placing it this way, as opposed to simply just a sale of their own art or creation. And this opens a lot of really interesting doors. It opens doors for us in terms of potential entry price, in terms of the familiarity with the artists, in terms of how we can work with them. It opens a lot of opportunities for being able to go directly to artists saying, hey, we have demand for your piece. Maybe we could go this way. It offers up potentially favorable taxation for them because they might be switching to capital gains now, and other things that have long-standing been out of their reach. And so this is one of the cool structures that we found that we can work with there. And so we've been focusing a lot on that lately, less about necessarily pure money in, acquire piece, vote, and place. And starting to work directly with artists and saying, hey, community, who should we be working with? Let's go to them. Let's have them place a piece in. This will be good for everyone. And we don't necessarily have to constantly raise money to buy. We can just support the artists directly in a stream. And that's been a really interesting new pathway that we've been exploring over the last 6 months or so that I think is even more beneficial. We can, because we can work with a larger string of artists, et cetera. And
not only know your investors, but know your artists because
exactly.
You're close
know
to
your artists. KYA.
So you are buying, you are getting pieces of art from artists, but are you disposing as well of assets because maybe they're low performing or they're high performing and you want to raise new money for new pieces? How do you manage your collection?
We're certainly not disposing. I don't believe we're doing in the colloquial term. I think we think of it similar to the museum. We think of it as deaccession, right? So we look at it as in, is this a piece that would be better served somewhere else potentially? So is there an opportunity to place this with a person who's going to put it up forever? We don't make a claim that we can forever support everything, which I do think is a burden that traditional museums tend to have. They do kind of have to keep things for an extremely long time historically, which is why most museums have less than 5% of their collections on display at any given time. We look at this as almost a positive. I mean, it seems like it's financialization is often seen as a negative. I look at this as, hey, if we can maintain as much on display of our collection as possible, and can over time deassess a piece into a location, a place, a business, a person, a collection, a foundation that will continue to maintain its exposure publicly while allowing us to take more opportunities for more art to grow the overall collection, this is positive. So what we generally have is roughly a 36-month minimum guarantee that we're keeping things for that amount of time, and then looking at opportunities after that. And we believe that over time, it'll probably look like somewhere between 8 and 10% of the collection would be deassessed every year to basically free up space and opportunity to bring more in. And that'll largely be tied to sort of curatorial opportunities and, at some level, maybe financial performance.
And probably the pieces of art that you are deassessing, the buyers are often buyers from the community because they just love the piece and they proposed it, and it would stay within the family. Or
we have I would call it an unofficial ROFR, like an unofficial right of first refusal to community first. Can't put that contractually in, but just because the nature of the conversation will occur there first, it kind of lets people jump in if they have that interest pretty quickly.
So yeah, we have really, the concept is very futuristic, but well thought through. You are transparent, you're following the rules. You use technology wisely, as I hear. So what is your take on museums overall and art collecting? How will the world look like in 5 to 10 years?
Wow, that's a meaty one. I think museums are going to exist forever. I think museums are probably some of the most important cultural institutions we have. There's no question that that's the case. I think they will have to evolve like everything else has, and they have themselves over the last 50 to 60 years of what that looks like, from what they display to how they woo patrons to how they drive their business model, getting people through the door plus donations, right? And so I think over time we might be able to support them. We might be a place that could loan and place things there for them, and maybe even help them with their deaccession into us, back out into public. Often they have a lot of problems and internal drama if they just decide to sell something. I think we might actually be a nice buffer where if it's like goes through us and then it's 36, 48 months still on display, and then it enters back into the private market. That might be an interesting way to work with them for those opportunities. So I think that's one side, is that they'll exist, but they'll evolve. In terms of art and collecting, art specifically, I think that'll go through a pretty major change with a new generation of wealth kind of coming into its own. I don't know the exact number. I think it's $12 trillion is going to be successed and inherited from sort of the older boomer generation into
brings quite some opportunity
into largely millennials. And when you interview them, they don't necessarily want their parents' art or their grandparents or their homes, etc. They're going to sell a lot of that or move it, and then they're going to start collecting the things that they care about. Just like their parents loved this artist, they're going to love the artist that they've met and mean something to them in their current now, right? So I think that's one piece. And then in the overall sort of luxury and collectibles market, I personally am extremely bullish on two major trends, which I do think is luxury and identity, and kind of the intersection of the two of those. I think AI generally is going to make most things pretty good. Like it'll get to a point where it makes pretty good music and pretty good art and pretty good comic books and pretty good writing. It won't be exceptional, and it'll be a while. I'm not sure it'll ever be truly exceptional, because I think a human's randomness will eventually create the new exceptional. It will then eat that very quickly and mimic it. But there will be these moments of new peaks that will be generated, and a lot of value will accrue to the exceptional. And that will happen across many different sectors. And you couple that with a growing understanding of, let's just call it alternative assets as an asset class, specifically sort of real world assets, everything from watches to handbags to art. I think it'll start to be treated more like real estate has been treated for the last 100 years. And you'll see larger portfolio allocations into that, from everything from large family offices to institutionals, taking a real look at how these things are now stores of value. and how they have large enough liquidity markets to move and find opportunities there. And, I think we probably will play a role in some of that. And it would be an odd thing to fully sit out. I think most people are going to look at value accrual to the objects they purchase. If like, I don't think you should look at everything you do as an investment. I think that sounds like a pretty terrible way to live. But I think if you're spending real capital on anything, it's nice to think that this might be a place that holds value as opposed to just burns it. And all of those trends come together to a probably pretty informed millennial population owning the vast majority of wealth on the planet, changing the trends and growing their exposure to these types of assets. And that will be a shift.
It will be an interesting shift. I mean, interesting to follow, obviously, and feels like that you are in the right place. In the intersection between all these trends, and that Arkive will have a nice evolution. But that it's the only thing that we can wish you. I mean, I found the conversation fascinating. Tom, thanks so much for sharing your concepts that are not intuitive in the beginning. It was good to unpack and to discuss them. I really enjoyed the episode, and thank you so much for your time and sharing these stories with us. And all the best for Arkive going forward.
Danke. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Luxury on Air with Karine Szegedi and Felicitas Morhart. This podcast is provided to you by Deloitte Switzerland and the Swiss Center for Luxury Research. If you've enjoyed this episode, you can leave us a 5-star review. If you're keen to stay up to date on what's trending in the luxury industry, don't forget to subscribe. As always, you can find more information about the current episode in the show notes. We wish you all the best. Until next time.